The great throne room of the Empire buzzed with angry voices. Queen Hex sat on her crystal throne, her 6 arms crossed in frustration. Her purple skin had dark stripes that showed her growing anger. The human diplomats stood before her, looking small and weak in their bulky white suits. The throne room was massive, with walls made of black stone that reached up to a ceiling covered in glowing crystals. Huge pillars held up the roof, each one carved with the history of victories in war. The floor was made of polished metal that reflected the angry faces of the nobles who surrounded the throne. "Your people refuse our terms again," Queen Hex said, her voice deep and threatening. Her yellow eyes glowed as she stared at the humans. "We offer protection for your little colony. All we ask is for your technology and weapons. Why do you say no?" The queen was 8 feet tall and built like a warrior. Her arms were thick with muscle, and her hands ended in sharp claws. She wore armor made of black metal that had been passed down through generations of rulers. Around her neck hung a chain of teeth taken from enemies she had defeated in battle. Ambassador Sarah stepped forward. Her environmental suit made loud breathing sounds as it helped her survive in the heavy gravity of the world. The suit was white and bulky, with tubes and wires running across its surface. A clear helmet covered her head, and her voice came through electronic speakers. "Your Majesty, we cannot give you our military technology. It goes against our laws and our principles," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. The nobles around the throne made angry clicking sounds with their tongues. They were all tall and strong, with thick gray skin and sharp teeth. Their eyes glowed different colors: yellow, red, and green depending on their mood. To them, the humans looked like children playing dress-up in their protection suits. General, the largest in the room, stepped closer to the humans. He was 9 feet tall and covered in scars from countless battles. His gray skin was darker than the others, and his red eyes burned with anger. He wore the uniform of the Imperial Army, with medals and ribbons that told of his victories. "Your queen shows too much patience with these weak creatures," he growled, his voice like grinding stone. "We should take what we need by force. Their soft bodies would break easily under our hands." Other nobles nodded in agreement. Lord, a thin but dangerous-looking with green eyes, spoke up. "The general speaks wisdom. Why waste time talking when we could simply crush their little ships and take their secrets?" Queen Hex raised one of her hands for silence. She had ruled 12 star systems for 50 years through strength and fear. Her empire stretched across half the galaxy, and countless species paid tribute to her throne. But war with the humans would be costly. Their technology was impressive, even if their bodies were pathetic. The humans had arrived in ships that moved faster than anything they had ever built. Their weapons were precise and powerful, though they seemed reluctant to use them. Most interesting of all, they had medical technology that could heal injuries the thought were permanent. "There is another way," a quiet voice said from behind the other human diplomats. A man stepped forward, removing his helmet to show his face. He had dark hair and calm brown eyes. His skin was pale like all humans, but there was something steady about the way he moved. "My name is. I am the ambassador's brother," he said, his voice clear and confident despite being surrounded by creatures who could crush him with their bare hands. They laughed at the sight of his bare head. Without his helmet, looked even more fragile. His skin was pale and soft compared to their tough gray hide. His hair was thin and weak-looking, not like the thick plates that covered skulls. "Look at this one," chuckled Admiral, a female with blue eyes. "He cannot even breathe our air without choking. How amusing." But ignored the laughter and continued speaking. "I propose a marriage alliance between myself and Queen Hex. This would join our peoples in peace instead of war." The throne room fell completely silent. Even the queen stared at the human in surprise. Marriage alliances were common among noble families, but marrying outside their species was unheard of. It was considered impossible, both physically and culturally. "You jest," the queen said finally, her voice filled with disbelief. "You are small and weak. Your body could not survive mating with a. How could you be a worthy husband for the ruler of an empire?" Put his helmet back on, and the electronic speakers made his voice sound strange and artificial. He bowed deeply, showing respect in the human way. "I understand your doubts, Your Majesty, but consider this, our species could learn much from each other. I would be honored to serve as a bridge between our worlds." Ambassador grabbed her brother's arm, her suit making worried beeping sounds. "What are you doing?" she whispered through their private communication channel. "This is insane. You cannot survive on this world for more than a few hours without life support." But shook his head. He had studied culture for years before coming on this diplomatic mission. He knew that Queen Hex valued courage above all else, even in her enemies. He also knew something else, something that no other human had ever told the general snarled, showing his sharp teeth. "This is foolish beyond belief. The human would die from our gravity alone. His bones would break, his organs would fail. How could he provide strong children for our queen?" Other nobles joined in the mockery. "He cannot even walk properly in our world," said Lord. "His suit has to help him move. What use is a husband who needs machines just to stand up?" Queen Hex stood from her throne, her massive form casting shadows across the room. At 8 feet tall, she towered over all the humans. Her mind raced with possibilities. A marriage would give her a legitimate claim to human technology. It would also show other species that the empire was growing stronger through alliances, not just conquest. And if the human died from the stress of living in space, well, that would solve the problem and teach other weak species not to refuse her demands. "The human shows more bravery than I expected," she said slowly, her voice echoing through the throne room. "But marriage is sacred among my people. It is not just a political arrangement. Are you prepared for all the responsibilities?" Nodded without hesitation. "I am, Your Majesty. I believe our union could bring lasting peace and prosperity to both our species. Together, we could explore the galaxy as friends instead of enemies." The queen studied his face for a long moment. Behind his clear helmet visor, she saw no fear, only determination. His eyes were steady and calm, even though he was surrounded by creatures who could kill him without effort. It was foolish courage, but perhaps it was useful foolishness. "Very well," Queen Hex announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast throne room. "I accept your proposal. We will be married in 1 month's time, according to both our traditions. This alliance will bring peace between the Empire and the human colony of New Terra." The throne room erupted in shocked voices and angry protests. The human diplomats looked confused and worried. The nobles seemed both amused and disgusted. Some were already planning to bet on how long the weak human would survive. But remained calm, bowing again to his future wife with perfect respect. His heart was beating fast, but not from fear. Everything was going exactly as he had hoped. As the meeting ended and the humans were escorted to their guest quarters, Queen Hex watched them leave. She had agreed to marry the weak creature, but she wondered how long he would last in her world. The marriage might be very brief, but it would serve her empire's needs. She did not yet know that was far more than he appeared to be. She did not know that his people had reasons for appearing weak, and she certainly did not know that the bulky environmental suit he wore was not what it seemed to be. The wedding ceremony lasted 3 days, as was tradition. Wore a special reinforced suit that helped him move in the crushing gravity of the palace. Queen Hex had to help him several times when he stumbled or seemed too tired to continue. The suit was even bulkier than his normal environmental gear, with extra support systems and emergency medical equipment. The nobles watched with amusement as their powerful queen guided her weak new husband through the ancient rituals. Some whispered that she had lost her mind marrying such a fragile creature. Others placed bets on how many days he would survive before his body gave out completely. "Look how he shakes when he tries to lift the ceremonial cup," Lord said to his friends, pointing at as he struggled with what appeared to be a simple task. "One wrong step and he will break like glass." The wedding cup was made of heavy metal and was part of the traditional ceremony. For lifting it was easy, but needed both hands and visible effort. His suit's mechanical joints whined as they helped him raise the cup to his helmet's feeding port. But heard their comments and simply smiled behind his visor. He focused on learning their customs and showing respect to his new wife's people. Every movement he made was carefully calculated to appear weak and struggling, even though the truth was very different. The wedding feast was held in the grand dining hall, a room so large it could hold 1,000 guests. The ceiling was painted with scenes of victories, and the walls were decorated with weapons taken from defeated enemies. Long tables stretched across the floor, filled with foods that would poison most alien species. Sat at the high table next to his new wife, eating special human food through tubes that connected to his helmet. The process looked awkward and uncomfortable, reinforcing the image of humans as dependent creatures who could not even eat normal food. After the wedding, life in the palace became routine for. He lived in special rooms that had been modified for human needs. The gravity was reduced to half normal levels, and the air was filtered to remove gases that would harm human lungs. Servants had to help him carry heavy objects and climb the tall stairs that connected different levels of the palace. His environmental suit was always making noise, humming, beeping, and clicking as it worked to keep him alive. The sound became so common that palace staff learned to recognize his approach by the mechanical sounds. Some found it amusing, others found it annoying. Queen Hex found herself checking on him often throughout each day. She told herself it was just to make sure the alliance stayed strong and the human remained useful. But she began to enjoy their conversations. Was different from males, who only talked about fighting, conquering new territories, and proving their strength. "Tell me about your home world," she said one evening as they ate dinner together in her private chambers. The room was decorated with battle trophies and ancient weapons, but it added small touches that made it more comfortable, soft lighting and plants that could survive in the alien environment. Had to eat through a feeding tube in his helmet, which made conversation difficult but not impossible. "Earth is smaller than your world, Your Majesty. We have blue oceans that cover most of the surface and green plants that turn sunlight into food. The gravity is much lighter, so we can jump high and move quickly there." "It sounds weak," the Queen replied, but her voice was curious rather than insulting. She was genuinely interested in learning about this strange world that produced such fragile but clever creatures. Laughed, the sound distorted by his helmet's speakers. "Perhaps it is weak by your standards, but we learn to survive through cooperation instead of individual strength. Sometimes the weak find ways to win that the strong never think to consider." These conversations became the best part of Hex's day. Never tried to impress her with boasts or challenges, like males constantly did. Instead, he asked thoughtful questions about her dreams and plans for the Empire. He listened carefully to her answers and offered suggestions that showed real understanding. During council meetings, surprised everyone with his intelligence. When the nobles discussed trade routes between star systems, he suggested new paths that would save time and money. His knowledge of mathematics and physics was impressive, even by standards. When they planned military movements against rebellious planets, he pointed out weaknesses in their strategies that experienced generals had missed. His suggestions were always defensive rather than aggressive, focused on protecting forces rather than destroying enemies. "The human has a clever mind," Admiral admitted privately to the Queen after one particularly useful suggestion, "even if his body is completely useless in battle." But General disagreed strongly. He grew more frustrated with each passing day as he watched the Queen rely more on advice. "Intelligence without physical strength is worthless," he argued during private meetings with other military officers. What happens when enemies attack? Will he think them to death? The general's frustration reached a breaking point during a formal dinner with visiting ambassadors from other worlds. Several alien species had come to meet the Queen's new human husband and evaluate the strength of the Empire. To prove his point about human weakness, challenged to a friendly combat match. The general was confident it would show everyone how pathetic humans really were and embarrass the Queen in front of important guests. "Come, little human," said with a mocking smile, his red eyes glowing with anticipation. "Let us have a simple wrestling match. I will be gentle and try not to break your fragile bones." Looked up at the 9-foot-tall general from his chair. Even sitting down, was taller than when standing. The general's arms were thicker than his entire body, and his hands could easily crush a human skull. Politely shook his head. "Thank you for the honor, General, but I might get seriously hurt. My body cannot handle the same physical stress as yours. The gravity here is already at the limits of what my suit can compensate for." This response made and his supporters laugh loudly. The visiting ambassadors exchanged glances, clearly noting the weakness of the Queen's new husband. "See," announced to the entire dining hall, "the human admits he is weak and afraid. How can such a creature protect our Queen or produce strong children?" Other nobles joined in the mockery. "He needs machines just to breathe," laughed Lord. "What kind of warrior needs permission from his suit to move?" Queen Hex felt embarrassed and angry, but seemed completely unbothered by the insults. He simply continued eating his dinner through his feeding tube, occasionally making polite conversation with the guests who were willing to talk to him. Later that night, when they were alone in her private chambers, Hex confronted him about his behavior. "Why do you let them mock you like that? Do you not have any pride or fighting spirit?" Was quiet for a moment, adjusting his suit's various settings. The mechanical sounds filled the silence as he checked atmospheric levels and gravity compensation. "Pride can be a dangerous thing, my Queen. Sometimes it is wiser to let others think they understand you completely." "I do not understand what you mean," she said, her frustration clear in her voice. "You are intelligent and useful, but they see only weakness. Does this not anger you?" "On Earth, we have an old saying," replied thoughtfully. "The tree that bends in the storm survives, while the mighty oak that stands rigid gets broken and destroyed." Hex stared at him through his helmet visor. His dark eyes were calm and thoughtful, showing no sign of the humiliation she expected. "Are you saying you choose to appear weak on purpose?" "I am saying that strength comes in many different forms, Your Majesty. Your people value physical power above all else, which I respect and understand. But there are other kinds of strength that can be just as important." As the weeks passed, slowly won over some of the palace staff and minor nobles. He was kind to servants and remembered their names and personal details. He listened to their problems and sometimes offered helpful advice that improved their lives in small ways. Even some of the more conservative nobles began to appreciate his counsel during council meetings. His suggestions often saved the empire money and resources, while achieving the same goals through more efficient methods. But General grew more frustrated and angry with each passing day. He watched the Queen spending increasing amounts of time with her weak husband, and saw it as a sign of growing softness. He began meeting secretly with other military officers and nobles who shared his concerns about the direction of the empire. "She protects this pathetic creature like a mother bird protecting a wounded chick," complained to his supporters during their secret meetings. "This marriage is making her soft and weak. It makes our entire empire look weak to our enemies." Lord nodded enthusiastically. "The other star systems are starting to question her leadership. They see her caring for this fragile human and wonder if she has lost her warrior spirit completely." Meanwhile, Queen Hex found herself changing in ways she did not fully understand. His gentle manner and thoughtful words were affecting her more than she wanted to admit. She began to question some of the Empire's harsher traditions and consider alternatives to simple conquest and domination. When suggested treating prisoners of war with more mercy and dignity, she actually found herself considering the idea seriously. When he proposed using trade agreements and diplomatic negotiations instead of military conquest to expand their territory, she listened with genuine interest. "You are making me soft," she told him one evening as they watched the sunset through the large windows of her chambers. Reached out carefully and gently touched her large hand with his gloved fingers. The gesture was tender despite the mechanical barrier between them. "Perhaps I am helping you discover different kinds of strength you did not know you possessed." Neither of them realized that their growing closeness was being carefully watched by enemies who saw every sign of gentleness as weakness to be exploited. The storm was coming, and soon would have to make a choice about revealing who he really was. The rebellion started small, with whispered conversations in dark corners of the palace. General met with unhappy nobles who believed Queen Hex was becoming too weak and soft to rule the empire properly. These secret meetings took place in abandoned storage rooms deep beneath the palace, where the thick stone walls would prevent anyone from overhearing their dangerous words. "She spends hours every day talking with that human pet," complained Lord, his green eyes glowing with anger in the dim light. "Yesterday, she actually asked his opinion about our military budget, a creature who needs help walking upstairs giving advice about war and conquest." The group of conspirators had grown larger each week. What started as 5 disgruntled nobles had become nearly 30 supporters, including several important military officers and wealthy merchants. They all shared the same fear, that their queen was losing the warrior spirit that had made the empire great. His red eyes burned with fury as he spoke to the gathered rebels. "Worse than asking for advice, she is actually following his suggestions. I heard she is seriously considering his proposal to negotiate with the rebels instead of crushing them completely. Negotiation. As if we are some peaceful trading species instead of the greatest warriors in the galaxy." The rebellion was happening on a distant mining world where the local population had refused to meet their production quotas. The traditional response would be to bomb their cities and replace the rebels with more obedient workers, but had suggested offering better working conditions and fair wages instead. Admiral one of the members of the conspiracy, shook her head in disgust. "The human poison spreads through her mind like a disease. Soon she will have us negotiating with every enemy instead of showing them the strength they deserve to see." The conspirators met in secret chambers that had been built during ancient times when the palace was a military fortress. The rooms were hidden behind false walls and connected by narrow tunnels that most modern had forgotten existed. Here they could speak freely about their plans without fear of discovery. "The Queen has been contaminated by human weakness," declared to his growing group of followers. "Every day she becomes more like them, soft, merciful, pathetic. Soon our enemies throughout the galaxy will see this weakness and attack. They will think the Empire has become easy prey." Meanwhile, Queen Hex remained unaware of the growing threat brewing beneath her own palace. She was too focused on her strange new feelings for, and the changes happening in her own heart. His gentle nature was affecting her in ways she had never experienced before. The changes were subtle but constant. Where she once would have ordered immediate punishment for minor offenses, she now asked questions about the circumstances. Where she had always demanded absolute obedience, she began to consider whether her orders were fair and reasonable. During a council meeting about trade disputes, when Admiral suggested destroying the ships of merchants who demanded better prices, quietly asked, "Have we considered offering them a contract that benefits both sides?" The Admiral laughed harshly. "Humans and their soft solutions. We solve problems with strength and fear, not by giving gifts to people who oppose us." But Queen Hex found herself seriously considering suggestion. Perhaps we could try negotiation first. If diplomatic solutions fail, we can still use traditional methods. The council members stared at her in complete shock. The old queen would have ordered the merchant fleet destroyed immediately as an example to others. General's face darkened with rage, but he managed to keep his expression controlled and said nothing during the meeting. After the council session ended, approached several nobles in private. "You see how dramatically she has changed. How long will it be before she makes us all as weak as her human husband? How long before our enemies see this weakness and decide to test our strength?" The crisis came during the annual celebration of Empire Day, the biggest and most important festival of the year. The celebration lasted for a full week, with parades, competitions, and elaborate feasts. Representatives from dozens of alien species came to pay tribute to the Empire and renew their treaties. The great dining hall had been decorated with banners showing the Empire's greatest victories. The walls were covered with weapons and armor taken from defeated enemies over centuries of conquest. Long tables filled with exotic foods from across the galaxy stretched from one end of the massive room to the other. Queen Hex wore her ceremonial crown of black crystal, a priceless artifact that had been passed down through generations of rulers. The crown was so heavy that most beings could not even lift it, but she wore it with pride and grace. Sat beside her in his bulky environmental suit, looking small and fragile next to her magnificent presence. The dinner had been going well for several hours. Alien ambassadors presented gifts and renewed their pledges of loyalty. Nobles shared stories of their recent victories and conquests. The atmosphere was festive and celebratory, with everyone enjoying the food, drink, and entertainment. The first sign of trouble came when several servants began moving strangely through the crowd. They were carrying trays of food and drink, but their movements were too coordinated, too purposeful. Palace security noticed the unusual behavior, but before they could react, the lights suddenly went out. In the complete darkness, masked assassins burst through hidden doorways that most people did not even know existed. Their weapons glowed green as they fired deadly energy bolts toward the royal table. The attack had been planned perfectly, using the chaos and confusion to maximum advantage. "Protect the queen," shouted Captain of the Royal Guard, drawing his sword and rushing toward the attackers. Chaos filled the enormous hall. Nobles screamed and dove under tables for protection. Valuable dishes crashed to the floor as people scrambled for safety. Guards rushed toward the attackers from different directions, but more assassins appeared from concealed positions throughout the room. The attack had been carefully planned by someone who knew the palace layout perfectly. The assassins seemed to know exactly where Queen Hex would be sitting and how the guards would respond to an emergency. They had inside information that could only come from someone close to the royal court. Queen Hex rolled away from the table, drawing her ceremonial sword with one fluid motion. The blade was sharp and deadly, but she was outnumbered and caught by surprise. The attackers seemed to know exactly where she would move and how she would fight. Tried to help his wife, but his environmental suit made him clumsy and slow in the crisis. When an assassin turned an energy weapon toward him, he stumbled backward and fell heavily. His suit sparked and made warning sounds as it hit the stone floor, and he lay motionless. "The human is down," someone shouted over the noise of battle. Seeing her husband lying motionless on the floor filled Queen Hex with a rage unlike anything she had ever felt before. She fought harder than ever, cutting down two assassins who came too close to where had fallen. Her sword moved like lightning, and her 6 arms gave her advantages the attackers had not expected. But there were too many enemies, and they had planned their attack too well. They seemed to know her fighting style and had prepared countermeasures. Just as the battle seemed completely lost, reinforcements finally arrived. Captain had managed to rally additional palace guards from other parts of the building. They poured into the dining hall from multiple entrances, overwhelming the remaining assassins. Some attackers were killed in the fighting, while others managed to escape in the continuing confusion. When emergency lighting was restored, the aftermath looked like a battlefield. 3 assassins had been captured alive, while several others lay dead on the blood-stained floor. Many innocent guests had been wounded, and the beautiful dining hall was completely destroyed. Queen Hex rushed to where lay on the floor. His environmental suit was damaged and sparking, but the life support systems were still functioning. He was conscious but appeared shaken and weak from the experience. "Are you badly hurt?" she asked, helping him sit up against an overturned table. "I think I am okay," said, his voice weak and distorted through his damaged helmet speakers. "Just scared and confused. I have never been in a real battle before." The captured assassins were immediately taken to the palace dungeons for interrogation. Under the most severe questioning techniques known to they revealed that the attack had been planned to kill both the queen and her human husband. But despite hours of torture, they refused to name who had hired them or provided the inside information that made the attack possible. They died under interrogation rather than revealing their leader, showing the kind of loyalty that only comes from fanatic dedication. General arrived at the royal chambers within an hour to check on the queen, and he appeared deeply concerned and helpful, offering to double the palace guard and investigate the security failures that had allowed the attack to succeed. "This attack proves what I have been saying in council meetings," told the queen when they were alone. "Your enemies see your marriage to the human as a sign of weakness. They believe that killing your fragile husband will destroy your spirit and make you easier to defeat." Queen Hex looked at, who was resting in a medical chair while technicians worked to repair his damaged environmental suit. He looked so small and helpless, completely dependent on machines and other people for his survival. "Perhaps you are right," she said quietly, doubt creeping into her voice for the first time. "Perhaps this marriage has made me vulnerable in ways I did not consider." Nodded sympathetically. "I do not blame you, my queen. The human is pleasant enough company, and his advice has occasionally been useful, but our enemies will always see him as your greatest weakness. They will keep trying to hurt you through him." That night, as slept in his specially modified chambers, Queen Hex stood guard outside his door with her personal weapons ready. She had never felt so protective of another living being, but's words troubled her deeply. Had her feelings made her weak and vulnerable? Was she putting the entire empire at risk for the sake of one fragile human who could not even survive without constant mechanical assistance? She did not know that was already planning his next move. The assassination attempt had failed to kill its targets, but it had succeeded in planting seeds of doubt in the queen's mind. Now he would challenge her directly, using ancient laws that no one had invoked for over a century. According to the oldest traditions, any general could demand single combat with the ruler if they believed the empire was in mortal danger from weak leadership. If won such a battle, he would become emperor with absolute power. And once he ruled, the very first thing he planned to do was execute the human who had corrupted their queen and made her soft. 3 days after the assassination attempt, General made his move. He strode into the throne room during the morning court session, wearing his full ceremonial battle armor and carrying his ancestral challenge sword. The ancient weapon had been passed down through his family for generations and had never known defeat in single combat. The throne room fell silent as every noble and courtier recognized what was about to happen. His armor was polished to a brilliant shine, and the sword across his back gleamed with deadly purpose. His red eyes burned with the fire of absolute conviction as he approached the crystal throne. "Queen Hex," he announced in a voice that echoed through the vast hall like thunder, "I invoke the sacred right of the challenge of leadership. I claim that your rule has become weak and corrupted, endangering our great empire." Gasps filled the throne room. No one had challenged a ruler to ritual combat in over 100 years. The ancient law had been used only in the most desperate circumstances, when the very survival of their civilization was at stake. To invoke it now was either madness or the act of a true patriot. Queen Hex stood slowly from her throne, her 6 arms tensing with anger and surprise. She towered over most of the court, but was even larger than she was. His muscles rippled beneath his armor as he drew his massive sword and planted it point first in the stone floor. "You dare challenge me," she growled, her voice carrying the threat of immediate death. "What weakness do you claim to see in my rule? Speak your accusations before this court." Pointed his gauntleted hand toward, who sat in his usual place beside the throne. The human looked even smaller and more fragile than usual in his bulky environmental suit, surrounded by the towering nobles. "You have been corrupted by unnatural attachment to this alien creature," declared, his voice rising so everyone in the throne room could hear clearly. "Your enemies already know this weakness. They tried to kill him to wound your spirit. They see him as the key to destroying your strength." Murmurs ran through the assembled court. Many nobles nodded in agreement, while others looked shocked by his boldness. The visiting ambassadors from other species watched with keen interest, clearly evaluating how this challenge would affect their own relationships with the Empire. Continued his accusations with growing passion. "You ask his advice on military matters, though he has never fought a battle. You consider his suggestions about showing mercy to rebels and negotiating with enemies. These are not the actions of a true ruler." The general pulled his sword from the stone floor and held it high above his head. The blade caught the light from the crystal ceiling, sending bright reflections dancing across the walls. "Our ancestors conquered half the galaxy through strength and courage. They took what they wanted and crushed anyone who opposed them. But you would make us weak like the humans, dependent on technology and afraid to use our natural power." Queen Hex stepped down from her throne platform, her own weapons rattling as she moved. She had ruled through fear and strength for 50 years, and no one had ever dared question her fitness to lead. But she could see agreement in many faces around the throne room. "You question my strength," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Very well, General, I accept your challenge. We will fight by the ancient law's single combat to the death, with no weapons except those we can carry, no armor except what protects our vital organs." Tried to stand from his chair, his environmental suit making its usual mechanical noises as he struggled with the heavy gravity. "Your Majesty, please reconsider this. Perhaps there is another way to resolve this dispute through discussion and compromise." Laughed loudly, a sound like grinding metal. "Even now, the human tries to make you weak with talk of peace and compromise. A true ruler would have already killed me for my insult to your honor." "Silence," Queen Hex commanded, but doubt was already creeping into her mind. Was making her soft? Was she losing the warrior instincts that had kept her on the throne for half a century? The questions plagued her as she accepted the formal challenge according to ancient ritual. The combat was scheduled for the following day in the great arena outside the palace. Word spread quickly throughout the capital city and across the empire through faster-than-light communication networks. Thousands began arriving to witness their queen defend her right to rule. The arena was a massive stone structure built during the early days of the empire. It could hold 50,000 spectators and had seen countless battles over the centuries. The fighting pit in the center was a perfect circle of sand surrounded by walls 30 feet high, designed so that no combatant could escape once the battle began. Spent the evening with Hex in her private chambers as she prepared for the fight. She was sharpening her weapons and practicing combat forms, her massive body moving with deadly grace despite her age. Each movement was precise and economical, the result of decades of training and experience. "You should not have to fight because of me," said quietly, watching her practice with a mixture of admiration and guilt. If my presence here causes you trouble and danger, I could return to Earth. The marriage alliance could be dissolved without dishonor." Hex stopped practicing and looked at him through his helmet visor. She could see genuine worry in his dark eyes and something else, a depth of caring that no male had ever shown her. "You would leave me to save my throne." "Only if it would keep you safe," replied without hesitation. "I care more about your happiness and success than about our political alliance. Your empire needs you more than it needs this marriage." His words touched something deep in her heart that she had thought was dead. No male had ever offered to sacrifice for her benefit. They only cared about gaining power through marriage or association with her throne, not about her personal. "I will not lose this fight," she said firmly, trying to convince herself as much as him. "Is strong and young, but I am more experienced. I have been queen for 50 years because I have won every battle that mattered." But privately, she had serious doubts about her chances. Was in his prime, while she had grown comfortable with palace life and political maneuvering. When was the last time she had fought a real battle against a determined enemy who wanted to kill her? The next morning, the arena filled with spectators from across the empire. The royal viewing box sat high above the fighting pit, where would watch the combat. The box was protected by energy shields and guards, but he would still be close enough to see every detail of the battle. Queen Hex entered the arena from the traditional royal entrance, wearing minimal armor as the ancient laws required. She carried a sword in each of her 6 hands, her purple skin gleaming with war paint that told the story of her victories. The crowd cheered as she raised her weapons in salute. General appeared from the opposite entrance moments later. He was larger than the queen and moved with the confidence of someone who had never lost a fight. His gray skin was covered in ritual scars from countless battles, and his red eyes burned with fanatic determination. "People of the Empire," shouted to the massive crowd, his voice amplified by the arena's acoustics. "I fight today to save our civilization from weakness and corruption. Our queen has been poisoned by alien influence that makes her soft and merciful. I will restore our true strength and warrior spirit." Many in the crowd cheered his words enthusiastically. Queen Hex realized with growing alarm that had more popular support than she had known. If she lost this battle, would certainly die, and the empire would return to its most brutal and aggressive traditions. The battle began with a thunderous clash of metal as the 2 warriors met in the center of the arena. Queen Hex used her multiple arms to attack from 6 different angles simultaneously, but was younger and faster than she had expected. His massive 2-handed sword moved like lightning, blocking her strikes and forcing her backward across the sand. Watched from the royal box, his hands clenched in worry inside his environmental gloves. His suit constantly monitored his stress levels and automatically adjusted his breathing mixture to keep him conscious, but nothing could calm his fear for his wife's safety. The fight continued for almost an hour under the blazing sun. Both warriors bled from numerous wounds, but youth and size were proving superior to the queen's experience and skill. His sword cut through her defenses again and again, while her counterattacks seemed to have less and less effect. Queen Hex began to stumble as blood loss weakened her. Sword cut deep into her left shoulder, severing muscles and nerves. 2 of her arms went numb and useless, and she dropped the weapons they had been holding. "You see how she weakens," roared to the cheering crowd, pressing his advantage ruthlessly. "The human has made her soft and vulnerable. She no longer has the strength to lead our empire." He drove the queen back toward the arena wall with a series of powerful attacks. She tried desperately to defend with her remaining weapons, but she was losing too much blood and growing weak from exhaustion. The end seemed inevitable. The final blow came suddenly and without warning. Sword cut through her guard like it was made of paper and pierced her chest just below the heart. Queen Hex fell to her knees, then collapsed face first onto the bloody sand. The crowd erupted in mixed cheers and shocked silence. Half the audience celebrated its victory, while others mourned the fall of their longtime ruler. The new emperor raised his bloody sword in triumph, basking in the adoration of his supporters. "I am your emperor now," he declared to the arena full of witnesses, "and my first act will be to execute the alien corruption that weakened our former queen." He pointed his sword directly at the royal box where sat motionless. Guards immediately began moving toward the stairs to arrest the human and bring him down for public execution. But something in his posture had changed. For the first time since arriving on the world, he began to stand up slowly from his chair. His movements were different, somehow more controlled and purposeful than anyone had ever seen from him before. The arena began to fall silent as people noticed the change in the human's behavior. Even paused his victory celebration to stare at the small figure high above them. Reached up with both hands and carefully removed his helmet, letting it fall to the floor of the viewing box. For the first time, he breathed air directly into his lungs without mechanical assistance. Everyone expected him to collapse immediately from the toxic atmosphere, but remained standing. His hands moved to his environmental suit's control panel, but not to the life support systems everyone expected. Instead, he began shutting down entirely different systems whose true purpose no had ever understood. Stood in the royal viewing box, his helmet lying forgotten on the floor beside his chair. For the first time since coming to the world, he breathed their thick atmosphere directly into his lungs. The crowd expected him to collapse within seconds from the poisonous gases, but he remained perfectly steady on his feet. His hands moved quickly across his environmental suit's control panel. Red warning lights flashed as he disabled system after system. They had always assumed these systems were keeping him alive, but the truth was far different from what anyone had imagined. "What is the human doing?" Someone in the crowd shouted, confusion clear in their voice. General laughed from the arena below, still standing over Queen Hex's motionless form. "The alien is committing suicide rather than face proper execution. How fitting that he dies like a coward." But Queen Hex, though wounded and bleeding on the sand, was still conscious enough to watch what was happening. She could see his face clearly for the first time without his helmet visor blocking her view. His expression was not one of defeat, desperation, or fear. Instead, she saw calm determination and something else, controlled anger. Finished shutting down his suit's various systems and began removing the bulky equipment piece by piece. The crowd gasped in amazement as they realized how much machinery he had been carrying. What they had thought was life support equipment was revealed to be something entirely different. Heavy gravity compensators crashed to the floor of the viewing box with loud metallic sounds. Atmospheric pressure regulators clattered down the stairs. Movement restriction harnesses designed to limit his speed and strength fell away like broken chains. The environmental suit had not been keeping alive in their world, it had been restraining him. As the last pieces of equipment fell away, stood revealed in simple black clothing. His body looked completely different now, not fragile and dependent, but lean, muscular, and powerful. The bulky machinery had hidden his true physical condition for months. "Impossible," breathed Admiral from her seat in the noble section. "How is he surviving our gravity without mechanical assistance? How is he breathing our air?" Walked calmly to the edge of the royal viewing box and looked down at the arena floor 50 feet below. The fall would seriously injure or kill even a healthy, but showed no hesitation. He simply stepped over the protective barrier and dropped into empty air. He landed in the center of the arena with an impact that shook the entire massive structure. The stone floor cracked in a spider web pattern beneath his feet from the tremendous force. Dust and debris flew in all directions from the point of impact. But when the dust settled, stood up without any sign of injury, not even breathing hard from the effort. General stared in complete shock and disbelief. What are you?" he stammered, his confidence shattered by what he had just witnessed. Began walking slowly across the arena toward the new self-proclaimed emperor. His movements were fluid and controlled, but there was something terrifying about the way he moved. Every step was perfectly balanced, like a predator stalking dangerous prey through dense forest. "I am exactly what I have always been," said, his voice now clear and strong without electronic speakers. "I am a human being from the planet Earth, but not the kind of human you thought you understood." The entire arena had fallen completely silent except for the sound of footsteps on stone. 50,000 watched in stunned amazement as the small human approached their largest and strongest general without any visible fear. Recovered from his shock and raised his massive sword. He was twice his size and had just defeated the most powerful warrior in the Empire. The blood of Queen Hex still dripped from his blade as he prepared to crush this insolent alien. "You think removing your machines makes you strong?" roared, charging forward with his sword raised high. "I will show you the difference between real strength and alien trickery." The general's sword came down with enough force to split a boulder in half, but simply reached up and caught the blade in his bare right hand, stopping the attack completely. The sound of metal being crushed filled the silent arena as fingers slowly closed around the sword. Tried desperately to pull his weapon free, using all his considerable strength, but the sword would not move even a single inch, held it as easily as if it were made of soft clay instead of hardened battle steel. "You see," continued in a conversational tone, as if they were discussing the weather, "my people evolved on a world much harsher than yours. Earth has stronger gravity, more violent weather, and deadlier predators than anything you have ever faced. We had to become very strong just to survive our childhood." With a casual flick of his wrist, threw the ruined sword aside. It hit the arena wall with such tremendous force that it embedded itself 3 feet deep into solid stone. The impact sent cracks running up the wall for 20 feet in all directions. Threw a desperate punch with his massive fist. The blow had enough power behind it to shatter rock and bend metal, but caught the general's hand in his own palm and stopped it completely. Then he squeezed gently, and the sound of breaking bones echoed clearly through the arena. The general screamed in agony and fell to his knees, his hand crushed beyond any hope of healing, but was not finished explaining the truth about humanity. "The equipment I wore was not designed to help me survive in your environment," he said, speaking loudly enough for the entire arena to hear. "It was built to restrict my natural physical abilities. My people wear such devices when we visit other species to prevent unfortunate accidents." More guards rushed into the arena from multiple entrances, determined to rescue their new emperor, but moved like lightning made flesh. He dodged their clumsy attacks easily and disabled each guard without causing permanent injury. His speed was impossible to follow. One moment he was in front of them, the next he was behind them, and they were falling unconscious to the sand. Within minutes, all of supporters lay defeated on the arena floor. Had not killed any of them, showing the same restraint he had practiced for months, but they would not be threatening anyone again for a very long time. The crowd of 50,000 sat in complete stunned silence. They had always thought of humans as weak, fragile creatures who needed constant protection and assistance. Now they realized they had been completely and dangerously wrong about everything. Walked across the sand to where Queen Hex lay bleeding from her wounds. He knelt beside her massive form and gently lifted her as if she weighed no more than a small child. His movements were careful and tender despite the incredible strength he had just displayed. "Are you badly hurt, my wife?" he asked softly, genuine concern clear in his voice. I will heal," she managed to say, though she was clearly in significant pain. "But why did you hide your true nature? Why did you let them all think you were weak and helpless?" Smiled sadly as he looked down at her. "Because strength without wisdom and restraint is nothing more than tyranny. My people learned this lesson long ago through bitter experience. Sometimes the greatest power lies in choosing not to use your full abilities. He looked up at the shocked crowd filling the arena. We could have conquered your empire easily if we had wanted to do so. Our technology is impressive, but we ourselves are our greatest weapon. But we chose friendship and alliance instead of conquest and domination. Queen Hex finally understood why he had been so patient with insults and mockery for all these months. He had been holding back power that could have destroyed not just individuals but entire armies. The restraint required must have been incredible. You let them humiliate you to keep them from being afraid of your people, she realized with growing amazement. Fear creates enemies where there could be friends, explained simply. We wanted allies and partners, not terrified subjects, so I played the role of a weak human who needed constant protection and care. It seemed much kinder than revealing what we really are. General crawled across the sand, clutching his destroyed hand to his chest. The Empire will never accept a monster as royal consort, he gasped through his pain. Looked down at him with calm, patient eyes. I am not a monster, General. I am simply what happens when a species evolves under extremely harsh conditions for millions of years. My people choose to be gentle and merciful despite our natural advantages, not because we are weak or afraid. He turned to address the entire arena, his voice carrying clearly to every corner of the vast structure. Queen Hex is your rightful ruler. She showed great wisdom in seeking alliance and friendship rather than trying to take what she wanted by force. Those who question her judgment should remember that she chose peaceful cooperation with beings who could have taken everything you possess. The crowd began to murmur among themselves, looking at with entirely new understanding. They no longer saw a weak creature who needed protection, but a powerful being who had deliberately chosen to appear harmless and dependent. Queen Hex smiled through her pain as helped her slowly stand upright. Her strange husband had revealed himself to save her life and her throne, but more importantly, he had shown her people what true strength really meant, the wisdom to hide your power until the moment when it was truly needed. The alien queen had indeed been astonished when her human husband revealed his true strength, but she was even more impressed by his wisdom in keeping it hidden until the perfect moment. As the arena erupted in confused but respectful cheers, she knew that her empire had just learned a lesson it would never forget about the true nature of humanity.